Okay, so you just spent some time watching a video on how to graph an inequality that's given, a quadratic inequality that's given in vertex form. Now we're going to work on the back side of the 8.5 note sheet, and we are going to follow the same process, except in the beginning we're going to be given standard form, so ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're still going to find those 5 points to graph, we're still going to decide if it's solid or dotted, and we're still going to decide where to shade based on that test point. The difference is how we figure out our very first point. So flip to the back side of your note sheet, and again, standard form will look like what you see at the bottom of this first graph, like x squared minus 4x plus 1, and we still need to be able to find the vertex. Now, this is a review of how to do that. If it's in standard form, we need to remember that h, which is the first component of the vertex, is negative b over 2a. That's how we find the line of symmetry as well. I would actually say you probably don't need the line of symmetry, but when we did learn it, we did talk about learning it that way. Now remember, this is in ax squared plus bx plus c form. Because the reason we need that is we need to find h, which is the opposite of b, over 2a. So we need to be able to identify what a and b are. Again, a is the number attached to the front of the x squared, which in this case would be a 1, because there's no number there. And the b is the number attached to the front of the x, and if it's a negative or a minus like this one, you use the negative. So when I go to find the h, it's negative b over 2a, I bring this negative over, but b, we said, is a negative 4. So it's a negative 4 over 2 times a, we said, is 1. And again, a negative times a negative is positive, so I have 4 over 2. It's going to be 2. Now, I think when I taught this, we just went right to the vertex. That's the h value of the vertex. And then the line of symmetry is always just x equals whatever that x value is. So these two numbers will always match which order you put them in. That is what it is. So to find the vertex in standard form, it's not quite as quick and easy as in vertex form where you can just look at it, but you first have to calculate the h value, or the input. And now that I know the input is 2, I can replace the x's with that. So I take my x squared minus 4x plus 1. So I take this quadratic that I'm dealing with, and now I plug in a 2 for x, because I figured out that the x value has to be 2, and I want to know when x is 2, what's y. So 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 1. 4 plus a negative 8 is negative 4 plus 1. We get negative 3. So for an input of 2, the output is negative 3. And so my vertex of this parabola is positive 2, negative 3. So that right there is the only difference between graphing a vertex form quadratic inequality and a standard form quadratic inequality, and that is finding the vertex. If it's in vertex form, you can just see it from the equation. If it's in standard form, you do have to calculate it by doing negative b over 2a to find the x component, plugging that back into the equation to find the y component. From there, I still need to find my other 4 points. As we talked about, we're still going to take a. Now again, a is a little different. It's the number attached to the x squared. So my a is 1 in this case. And I'm going to take a times 1 squared. It's always a times 1 squared. 1 times 1 is 1, which means from the vertex, I'm going to go over 1, up 1 in each direction. And then to find my other 2 points, I'm going to go a times 2 squared. So 1 times 2 squared is 1 times 4. So I'm going to go over 2, up 4 in each direction. So from the vertex, over 2, up 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, up 4. Once I have that, I decide if it's going to be solid or dotted. This is a case where it's less than or equal to, which means that it's going to be solid. Come back down, and I draw my parabola through those points. And now this one's kind of close, but because, and I didn't draw it real well, but because it goes through the point 0, 1, I know that it can't go through 0, 0. So when I go to do my test point, I can in fact use 0, 0, even though my drawing wasn't as good as I would like it. Okay, so I test 0, 0, which means I take the equation, or the inequality, sorry, which was y is less than or equal to x squared minus 4x plus 1. I plug in the 0 for the x and the y. Then I simplify. Now, standard form, The first part's a little bit more challenging, or more work, I should say, to find the vertex. But the good news is finding the test point, as long as we can use 0, 0, that's going to be quicker and easier than the other one. Because I get 0 is less than, this is 0, this is 0. I just have that constant. So is 0 less than or equal to 1? Yes, it is. So true. Which means that I am going to say that this point right here is a part of the solution. It is outside of the parabola. So I'm going to shade around it. Shade outside. I would encourage you at this point to try the second one on your own. So pause the video and see if you can do it, and then come back and check your answers. Okay, so my first thing is I need to know what A and B are. A is 2, B is a negative 8. So I need to find my H value, which is negative B over 2A. Negative, again, negative 8 over 2 times 2. On top, negative times negative is positive. 2 times 2 is 4. So my H value is 2 in this case, which means my line of symmetry is x equals 2. And now I need to do my work to find my vertex. I'm going to do the work on the side here. So I have 2x squared minus 8x plus 2. And now I have an input of 2, so I'm going to plug that in. That's 8 times 2 plus 2. Plug that 2 in place of my x's. This 2 just comes down. 2 squared is 4 minus 16 plus 2. I get 8 minus 16 plus 2. Negative 8 plus 2. I get negative 6. So my vertex in this case is 2, negative 6. I plot a point there. I now need to find my other 4 points. Again, my A value is 2, which is going to be important because that's that number in front. So A is 2 in both cases. So for my second and third point, I do 2 times 1 squared, which is 2 times 1, which is 2. So I'm going to go over 1 up 2 in each direction. And then for the second one, I'm going to do, or my fourth and fifth one, I'm going to do A times 2 squared, which is 2 times 2 squared is 4, so I get 8. So again, from that vertex, I'm going to go over 2, up 8, over 2, up 8. Okay, next I'm going to ask myself, solid or dotted? Because it's greater than or equal to, it will be solid through those points. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, there we go. Solid through those points. And again, probably a bad drawing. Let me actually fix this one so that's not 2 in a row that are bad. But I know because I can see the y-intercept is 0, 2, it can't go through 0, 0. So I am allowed to use 0, 0 as my test point again. Again, we say it's solid. I am going to use 0, 0. And again, if I take that inequality that we had, y is greater than or equal to 2x squared minus 8x plus 2. If I plug in 0 for x and y, so all my x's and my y. The nice thing about standard form is if I'm using 0, 0, these parts go away, and I ask myself, is 0 greater than or equal to 2? No, it is not, or false, which means that this point right here is not a part of the solution. Should have probably extended my lines up to the end of the grid, which means I can't shade on the outside, so instead I shade everything inside the parabola. Okay, last but not least, I have the last equation, y is less than negative 3x squared plus 5. Again, in this case, my A is negative 3. B is a little more confusing because I can't see anything there. So this is the same as negative 3x squared plus 0x plus 5. So it's important that we use B as 0. A lot of times people would accidentally use the 5. So H is negative B over 2A. So I have a negative 0 over 2 times negative 3, which is technically 0 over negative 6, or negative 0 over negative 6. I've had a lot of questions. People keep saying, like, well, there's a 0, I can't do division with 0. Remember, we can do 0 divided by a number. We just can't do a number divided by 0. So as long as 0 is on top, that's okay. Our output, or we just get 0. So my vertex has an x value of 0, which means the axis of symmetry is x equals 0. To find the y value of that vertex, I'd take that equation. Oops, I don't need this part. Negative 3x squared plus 5. I plug in 0. And I get negative 3 times 0 plus 5, which just gives me 5. So the vertex is at 0, 5. My a value is still negative 3, so when I go to find my next 4 points, I'm going to use a as negative 3. First, I do negative 3 times 1 squared, negative 3 times 1, which is negative 3. Which means I go over 1, down 3 from the vertex. Over 1, down 3. And then I do a times 2 squared, so negative 3 times 2 squared. Negative 3 times 4, I get negative 12. Which means from this vertex, I'm going to go over 2, down 12. That's 5, go 7 more. Okay, so those are my 5 key points. Next I have to decide if it's solid or dotted. Because it's just less than, it's going to be dotted. So I draw a dotted parabola through those 5 points. And then last but not least, I can still use 0, 0 as my test point because it clearly falls inside of the parabola. So we did a dotted line, testing 0, 0. And again, my equation, or inequality I should say, is negative 3x squared plus 5. So y is less than negative 3x squared plus 5. I substitute 0 for the x's and the y. And again, this part goes away. I ask myself, is 0 less than 5? Yes, it is, or true, which means this is an answer to my expression, so I shade over it, which in this case would be inside the parabola. Okay, so that's a review of how to graph a quadratic given standard form, and then again, steps 2 and 3 from before are the same. You should now work on your 8.5 homework worksheet. It's 1 page, 1 side as usual, so make sure you take the time to do that. There's some good review and some good practice problems for this. Tomorrow we'll work on 8.6. Thank you.